Hello and welcome to Creation Speaks. Glad that you could join me today, kind of reflecting on the Word, what God is doing, what God is doing in your life, in my life. And today I want to tackle the question, is that finding meaning and purpose? We spend a good deal of time looking for meaning and purpose. If you go to the bookstore or if you go online and look up self-help, there is so much information out there on self-help. The bookshelves and the digital spaces are full of self-help. But you would think at some point we would finally answer that question for ourselves. And I love reading a good motivational, encouraging book. But one thing I've noticed is that it never really answers that question. It gets you excited, it gives you motivation, it gets you thinking, but it never answers that question to what is the meaning, what is the purpose. So where do we find the answer? How do we come to that place where we know it's like, okay, I'm right where I'm supposed to be? I'm kind of convinced that it's not found where we really think it's to be found. We continue to seek after that question and trying to find that answer. And in some ways, it feels a moving target. So we spend a lot of time searching that out for our own lives, and Jesus calls us to something different. He calls us to seek first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness. He invites us into what he says is a narrow way. He said there's a broad way that leads to destruction. There's a lot of advice out there about finding purpose in your life. There's a lot of advice to what you need to do to find fulfillment, whether that be to work a 4-hour work week or work a 10-hour day. I mean, what does that look like? Is it found in making more money or having a job that is fulfilling? Those questions are all there, and yet I think that question is always moving, that the what we think is the fulfillment of that is always moving. And Jesus says, hey, it's not found there. He says, seek first the kingdom of heaven. And what does that look like? What does it look like to seek first the kingdom of heaven? Really, there's only one way to quench our thirst. And Jesus calls us to take up our cross and follow him. He says, let go of seeking your own way, but to seek first the kingdom. And in that, he's saying, he's trying to turn our eyes from seeking our way to trusting the Father, the Heavenly Father who loves us and has promised to take care of all our needs. He knows our needs even before we ask. He invites us to ask, seek, knock, to keep coming, keep asking, keep seeking, and trusting the Father is going to do it. And it's really just almost like a self-abandonment of our own self, to die to trying to fill that meaning and purpose and trusting the Father. He's going to take care of us. And so when we're freed up, knowing that God's going to take care of our lives, what does that mean? What does that look like? There's a quote here I want to read from James MacDonald. I think it's kind of along the same line. He writes, he feels joy in himself, but it comes from him, from others, not from himself, from God first, and from somebody, anybody, everybody next. So our finding that joy, the fulfillment, does not come from ourselves. It's in ourselves, but it doesn't come from ourselves. It comes from God first and then from others. Jesus said that if you did it unto the least of these, my brethren, you did it unto me. See, Jesus calls us out of ourselves, out of our selfish ambition, out of our selfish ways. He is giving us the ability, because of what he's done for us, to live a new life, a life that isn't self-absorbed. One more quote by him: the man who really knows God is and always will be content with what God, who is the very self of his self, shall choose for him. He is entirely God's and not at all his own. When you come to Christ, you recognize that we belong to him. And that fulfillment will never be found in seeking our own way and trying to fulfill our own pleasures and desires, because, it's ever moving. The thought of meaning and purpose it's elusive. It's like money. We just need a little bit more, and then I will have arrived. Then I will have found my purpose. And yet we'll never come to a place where it says it's enough. Same thing with seeking our purpose or meaning. It's fleeting like a bird. You go down to a restaurant with outside dining in a city. A lot of times you see little birds flying in and eating the crumbs off the floor, and you can get pretty close to them, but you can never catch them. They flee away, and that's kind of how it is. There's an interesting proverb, and something to really kind of consider as we look at this. He's in some Proverbs 27, it says, hell and destruction are never full, so the eyes of man are never satisfied. What is it? Your eyes will never be satisfied. If you're seeking to fulfill yourself, seeking to find meaning and purpose outside of what Jesus would call the narrow way. It's interesting that in the narrow way, what some would say, oh, that's narrow, that's hard, that's difficult. But that's where life thrives. It's in a narrow way that we see that abundance, feel that joy, because it's not coming from ourselves. It's coming from the Lord himself. So I'll leave that with you today, and I hope that maybe kind of consider that. And the Lord wants to completely change what we've been taught all of our life. You go through social media, life is not going to be found there. You scroll and there's inspiration, and you see what others are doing and what you're missing out on, what you think you should be doing better. And it only creates in you that discontent and that dissatisfaction. And so then you start seeking out, trying to plot your way, find your way. And, you read the self-help books and trying to find meaning and purpose. And Jesus says, hey, come follow me, and you will find rest for your soul. Come away from yourself. Come away from the world of what they're teaching. Come away from what you think is going to give you life and purpose and meaning. And Jesus just says, hey, come follow me. Because Jesus says, I have abundant life to give to you. Out of your heart will flow rivers of living water. To the woman at the well in the scriptures, if you read that story, a lady who has had multiple husbands, always seeking to find that place in life, finally came to the place where she saw that Jesus had the living water. We can live our lives pursuing our own way, our own desires, but Jesus says, no, that come away from that. I'm going to take care of you. The Father loves you. He cares for you. Come, follow me, Jesus says. I hope you find encouragement in that today. May you seek the Lord. If you desire to know God, he's not going to turn you away. He says to come, and you will find rest for your soul.